To you from the world of AV programming and control with James King. I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's great to be back with you. I know we had a guest last time, which we'll recap a bit, but I'm glad we get a chance to chat one-on-one this time.
As always, it's great to catch up with you, Steve, and it's great having guests on here, but also just catching up, like you said, is always a good one for us as well.
So if you guys missed it, the last two episodes are really special, actually. We got a chance to speak with Joe Way, and he talked with us a little bit about HETMA, which, if you don't know, is the Higher Ed Technology Managers Alliance. And we also got to talk a little bit about managing programmers from a non-technical standpoint. So two fascinating episodes, and I know that Joe will be able to appreciate some feedback if you reach out to him. So please check those out. Moving on to today's topic, we need to talk a little bit about what do we do when we need to adapt standards and adapt our designs or adapt the way we do things, because it's not always the case that you have all of the products that you need at your disposal. Perhaps something got discontinued, a new model came in, or something just doesn't meet your project schedule. And while standards are a good thing, we don't want them to be something that just locks you in, where you are left in a standstill or with a vacuum when you aren't able to get the specific products that you need and do the design just as you plan. So, James, talk a little bit, I guess, from your standpoint about something that you think of, or what would be the first step you would take when you are faced with that type of a situation?
So the first step I would take is making sure that I'm in meeting to my standards as closely as I can, but that we are still flexible to handle any bumps that may come along. So we might need to use spare equipment, which then does hurt us by not having the numbers of spares on the shelf as we would like, but at least it keeps our equipment the same, or close enough to the same that we can move forward. But even when that becomes difficult, is trying to find products that would give us the same outcome, even if they are maybe a different manufacturer or different size. Like, sometimes you're dealing with let's say like a DSP might be your standard could be a 4 in 4 out DSP. You might be able to get a 8x4 this time. Yeah, you don't need all 8 channels, but at least you can still do what you need to do. And then my third option would be evaluating new equipment. And the key word there is evaluating. You don't just roll it out into a production without really testing and making sure it can meet your end goal.
So I haven't been in the position to do design or to specify before. We're always on the receiving end, and we have to adapt to something that has been already decided or established. We aren't shy to provide insight if somebody asks, but we usually don't get the luxury of being able to design something or make those choices. And a lot of times what we talk to clients about is from a control standpoint. If you're using things that are of the same brand, a lot of times you don't have to reprogram a system. So that's one thing to think about. Sometimes you do, but you could get into a situation where you don't have to write a new module or change a driver or whatever that might be. But on the flip side, kind of talking a little bit of what you said, you also have to worry about the performance, and not every product of the same manufacturer is going to respond the same way. So there may be other considerations to think about. Whatever that could be function set, that could be a response time, that could be just simply timing. And so it's important to really think about all the implications. But I think the first thing, as you mentioned too, performance and making sure that it's going to meet your needs from an application and a functionality standpoint seems to make sense. And then beyond that, looking at it from a control standpoint, which I don't know that everybody really thinks about in the decision making process. But I realize you have that insight, but how often do you think that that's taken into consideration?
Oh, it's definitely not taken into consideration. It's definitely a unique, I would say, in my vertical of being higher ed, being in-house programmer, one of the designers and spec. So I get the luxury of designing the system, picking my equipment, and coding to basically put it right in my wheelhouse. So that is a benefit I get, but I agree. I don't think it's a benefit that majority of our listeners have.
Um, is there something that we can do to help with that? So is it something that that would help to educate what are the what are the implications? Because I think sometimes you look at substitutable products and they just assume that it's just going to go in and work fine, but we don't necessarily think of what else could be could cause an issue, or what impact it could have on programming. And one of the things too to think about, and we can kind of move into this a little bit further, is if you have a number of systems that are all done the same way, and now you have to change in a select few of those systems, how does that impact things? Because from a user standpoint, they don't necessarily care what product is on the other side. They want it to work and act the same. So
Yeah. No, like you said, the end user is not going to care if you're putting a Tron system in or a third party system, or Joe in the box type system in. They just want to come in, use the system, and have it work the way they feel it should work. Um, my suggestion would be, this is where us programmers kind of tend to fall flat, and we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, is we don't speak up. So when it comes down to us and saying, like, as you mentioned, you don't get to design or pick the gear, you're kind of giving a list and saying, all right, make it work, code it. The same thing is, if our superiors come to us and go, okay, we're doing this, make it work, we're going to make it work. They may not see the struggles we go through making it work. So next time it happens, they don't even think twice. Oh, Joe's going to get to work. He's a programmer. He knows what he's doing, not realizing Joe might spend 24 hours instead of 2 minutes fixing the code. So that's where we need to still do our job of getting the systems working, but we need to speak and talk to our supervisors and say, hey, if we follow these standards, I can have this done in, say, 10 minutes, where you're saving the fee, my costs, all that stuff. Talk about money. Everyone knows money and how you can keep costs down. Or when you keep throwing these wrenches into the equation, now you're tripling or quadrupling the cost of the project, not just with flat out cash, but time and resource.
one of the things I didn't initially think about is you're also in the position to have to live with that piece of equipment that you've now put in, like it or not. You can't just say, this was a bad idea and move on. The budgets are are set a certain way, and there really isn't a trade-in value for a piece of equipment typically. So and plus having to go back and modify a system can be a tall order, and unless there's a real dire need, I would imagine.
I agree. And again, what we need to do is show the value, and we can get down to the numbers. I even today I was listening to the A Plus podcast with Dan Ferrizzi and Mark Coxon, and he was talking about just like, in the standard days, conference rooms going down. The conference room goes down, we move to the next one. Well, what if you have a client in that room who's looking to drop, let's just even use a arbitrary number, $10 million on a project, and that conference room goes down? Do you could be losing that client, even if you went to a different room. That's money out your pocket. Same with us in education. You look at it, every student is paying a tuition to be in the room. And the equipment is not working, that's money that students going, I just blew, let's say, even if we do $1,000 a student per class, because it's probably more than that, but you have 30 students, that's 30, 300,000. My math's a little flake out here right now, but that's a lot of money sitting. Yeah, that's $30,000, give or take, sitting in one classroom. And you want to get them up and move to another room, hoping that a room's open. So that's all money that the C-suite and middle management can see. It's tangible to them. And that's what we as programmers have to stress, that saying, hey, we get this Joe Smo product, not knowing what it could do, we might be out not just the price of the product, but also $30,000 that the students just miss out on.
And that's also uh, tacking on the fact that they're going to be embarrassed and that they may lose confidence in using that room in the future. That doesn't take a lot, and sometimes that may cause them to be apprehensive to use any technology, depending on who they are. So it's one bad experience can really make a big impact. I think those are really good points. As we wrap up, something that comes to mind for me would be trying to design systems with alternatives. So I know that consultants do this sometimes, where they'll say, here's our design, and these are substitutable brands. And when they do a bid spec, and on some level that makes sense. I think the reason that they do it is because the winner of the bid may be more comfortable or proficient, or be a dealer of one product versus another. I think those days to where there's exclusivity probably have passed, but I do feel like some have more of a comfort level with one product or another. But being able to design systems that can have a mix, that you can you have options, and sometimes it's important to do that in different brands. Although I said before, staying in the same brand can provide a lot of value, but if you do things in different brands, that gives you that flexibility if needed, to be able to not be left in a bind if something goes wrong, or a manufacturer has difficulties being able to supply you with product. So I just think it's something to consider, and it might be something that is talked about more often as we go through some times where we're having some product backlogs and equipment shortages.
Oh, 100%. You got to be flexible, but I'm like you. I like to say within certain brands and our standards, but I don't like to box myself in. I'm always looking and evaluating products, and that's where I think us programmers and really get a huge benefit from having a sandbox environment. So yeah, even if we don't have a supply chain issue, or products are not being backlogged or delayed. Say you see a new product come out that piques your interest, get it and test it. Throw it into a sandbox environment, kick the tires, because our centers should be able to still meet the goals, but be flexible enough that we're being good financial stewards for our businesses.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. That way, you're building a library of products that you can choose from, and you can confidently make choices if your first choice isn't available. So I think that's a good way for us to wrap it up today. How can people get in touch with you and continue the conversation, learn more what you're up to?
As always, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Twitter is AV_James King. LinkedIn, James King. I don't use it much, but I'm starting to be a little more active on there. You can also visit higheredav.com, where I write the monthly article, IT and AV column.
And for me, you can reach me on social media at Steve Greenblatt, and I do some writing on my company blog at controlconcepts.net, AV Network, and on a bit on a couple of different podcasts. One of them is AV Plus, as you mentioned recently, and also do a state of control on the AV Nation family of podcasts. So please check those out. But most importantly, let us know that you're out there. Let us know that this content is something that is valuable to you. Share an episode with a friend, leave us a review, and also just reach out and send us some questions. Because as you know, this podcast is based on responding to programmers' needs and talking about what programmers do and informing the community of programmers. So please feel free to reach out, and you'll help us make this content be more applicable and keep the podcast moving strong into the future. With that, this has been Ask the Programmer.